Hello, I'm Kelda Yoon. The city has laid bylaw charges against two companies that left a construction bin in the middle of a Yorkville bike lane. As a result, a 24-year-old cyclist was forced onto the roadway where she was struck and killed by a truck driver 2 weeks ago. The bylaw charges could result in fines, but advocates say the potential penalties are too small to prevent future tragedies. Naama Weingarten has more.
When a young cyclist was struck and killed here on Bloor Street West in July, people were quick to point out the large construction bin that was blocking the bike lane. She was struck by the driver of a large truck right after she merged into the westbound car lane, which people told CBC was likely to avoid that bin that was in the way. Now the city says it laid bylaw charges against the companies that left it there. Ontario Trucking and Disposal faces 5 infractions for creating dangerous conditions and failing to provide proper signage. Mass contracting was also charged, bringing somewhat of a relief to people who regularly cycle the area.
Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised because, I don't know how many infractions of the bike lane blockages there are that don't get charged. I'm pretty sure it's fairly high, and I think sadly only because there was a death that this has happened.
It's great it's happened, but why is it only happening now?
The city says the maximum fine for each bylaw charge is $1,000 if they're found guilty in court and $200 if they pay it outside of court. But advocates say these fines won't be enough to deter others from doing it again.
I don't know how much of an incentive it is for them to not do it, but if they're going to go ahead and tow away the bin on them and charge them for that, that's how you start getting compliance.
There needs to be something more stringent here. If you kill or seriously injure someone as a result of your construction project, your very ability to make money and work in the City of Toronto on construction projects has to be called into question.
During our interview, a truck blocked the exact spot where the cyclist was killed. Speaking to reporters earlier, Mayor Olivia Chow said she supports stiffer penalties, but that's up to the province.
We cannot charge more than what we're allowed to charge. Do I personally wish that the fine is higher? Absolutely.
Diane Sachs, the city councillor representing the area, says the city could have stepped up with more serious penalties.
The Provincial Offences Act has 2 streams. For minor things, you can issue a ticket where the fines are very small. For serious offenses, you issue an information, which is a more formal kind of charge. It's for the same offense. And I have absolutely no idea why the city has treated this one using the minor route.
CBC has reached out to the 2 construction companies, but we're yet to hear back. In a written statement, a city spokesperson didn't comment on the size of the fines, but said that while it's impossible for enforcement officers to catch everything, the city is implementing daily patrols of bike lanes and conducting audits of construction work zones. Toronto police are yet to lay any charges in this case, but they previously said their investigation is open and ongoing. Naama Weingarten, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to a CBC News exclusive interview. For the first time since being charged with a series of sexual offenses, billionaire businessman Frank Stronach is answering our questions. He sat down with the Fifth Estate to respond to the allegations brought on by 10 people, including sexual assault, rape, and forcible confinement. One woman is also now sharing her story of sexual assault in detail. Mark Kelly spoke with both the woman and Stronach in separate interviews.
A defiant Frank Stronach arrived for the interview, insisting he had nothing to fear, nothing to hide.
You ready?
I'm always ready.
One of the biggest issues you now are facing are very serious legal charges that have been leveled against you.
Yes.
Like 10 women, 13 charges, and you know the list: attempted rape, sexual assault, forcible confinement. These are very, very serious charges. You will be 92 next month. How do you respond to these charges?
Well, first of all, that's in front of a court. We have a lot of data which totally, will prove that those things are lies. But I feel sorry for the woman which makes those charges.
One of those women is now 65. We've agreed to conceal her identity for this interview because she hasn't shared her story with friends and colleagues. She says in 1980, Stronach bought her champagne in a bar, and she woke up later with him in an apartment.
I was lying on my back. I could see him lying on top of me. It was rape. It happened. It was happening to me. I saw it happening.
The woman we're calling Lee provided these photos. She was 20 years old at the time of the incident, a horse groomer for Stronach at one of his stables.
He took away my fire. I had let it fester for a really long time.
It took Lee 35 years, but in 2015 she filed a complaint with the Toronto Police Service and recorded an interview with 2 officers.
I never heard another word back from the police. Not a phone call, not an email, nothing.
But this spring, police in Peel Region, west of Toronto, did contact her. She's now one of the 10 complainants in the criminal case against Stronach.
You're not a free person unless you're economically free.
During the interview, Stronach went to lengths to talk about his philanthropy, his business accomplishments, and the sad state of Canada's economy, suggesting it could be a factor in the criminal case against him.
Women might say, look, maybe I could collect some money this way or that way, okay? It's poverty, it's poverty what the problem is.
Do you think that for some of these women that is their goal, to get money from you?
There's no question, it's quite clear. It's quite clear.
We've held it in for so long, I didn't even realize how many women this might have even happened to.
Mark Kelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Police Inspector Joyce Scherzer has been found guilty of 2 counts of professional misconduct. The police disciplinary tribunal decision comes following a high-profile hearing that saw the senior officer accused of meddling in a traffic investigation into her nephew. Prosecutors allege her actions were a clear conflict of interest, and today the adjudicator agreed. Chris Glover has more.
Quite a scathing decision here in the tribunal room at the Toronto Police headquarters. The adjudicator said a reasonable citizen would have been shocked by Inspector Joyce Scherzer's actions as she found her guilty of misconduct for circumventing police procedure for the benefit of her nephew. The high-ranking officer sat emotionless as the decision came down, only occasionally shaking her head disapprovingly.
He says he's not hurt.
Police Inspector Joyce Scherzer on body camera footage after her nephew's vehicle collided with a pole outside the Boulevard Club on the lakeshore in May 2022. The high-ranking officer said she was only there as an aunt, but a disciplinary tribunal didn't buy it, finding her guilty of discreditable conduct and neglect of duty. The adjudicator, retired Superintendent Lisa Taylor, said regardless as to whether Inspector Scherzer believed her presence on scene was only as aunt, her duty as a senior officer eclipsed that role. Actions and inactions at the scene were inappropriate given her rank over the constable and given her relationship with the driver. The disciplinary tribunal heard the inspector had called for a constable from her division to respond to the crash. Then she didn't stop the officer from turning off his body-worn camera for a period of time, and she allowed her nephew Calvin to leave the scene without a breathalyzer test. In her decision, Taylor said Calvin may have had 0 blood alcohol at the time of the collision, but we will never know. Ultimately, Calvin was called back to the scene to complete the traffic investigation.
You're very fortunate that you have family members who have helped this go away in the big scheme of things, right?
Body camera footage from a second traffic officer highlighting how unusual it was that Calvin had been allowed to leave in the first place. The adjudicator found no collusion between Scherzer and the initial constable, but ruled that with Scherzer's 35 years as an officer, she should have known better. You circumvented the priority system to the benefit of yourself and your family, Taylor said, calling the initial investigation of the collision lackluster and less than stellar, and said those failings are hard to separate from the potential influence of a senior officer being at the scene.
Well, it is important that the methods that are in place to hold police officers, no matter what their rank, are working.
The Toronto Police Accountability Coalition says it's an important decision, highlighting the subtle influence high-ranking officers can wield, even with advancements in oversight technology like body-worn cameras.
If their intention is to hide what they are doing, that they can easily manipulate this equipment. And I do think it really should open up a bigger conversation about our reliance on tools like body cameras to ensure accountability. We're talking about a police culture. We're talking about the notion that there are some people who are worthy of being treated with deference, that are worthy of being given the benefit of the doubt.
The The adjudicator said the need for police accountability has never been higher, and in this case, she said that the actions of Inspector Scherzer went far beyond an honest mistake. I tried to speak with the inspector and her lawyer as they left the hearing room today, but they declined to speak to media, and the penalty hearing has now been set for October 28th. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Mayor Olivia Chow was joined by frontline workers today in the fight against youth violence in our city. They met at City Hall along with the Chief of Police to discuss solutions. Greg Ross was there.
Leaders from groups that have dedicated themselves to preventing youth violence had a chance to not only sit with the mayor, but also offer suggestions on how to fight back against it. The mayor says it's important to listen to people who are dealing with it firsthand.
Today, we focused on what worked or what has been working.
We've seen a rash of violent attacks in recent months. In many cases, they are being carried out by young people. In June, a 14-year-old was arrested and charged for a shooting at North Albion Collegiate where 2 people died and several others were injured.
We are, of course, alarmed by the rise of youth violence and young people, 14-year-old, committing crime, committing murder. We want to stop it. We want to intervene.
But stopping it may be easier said than done.
It is complicated. There is no one solution. We have standing here a representation of a number of approaches and programs that are successful.
But in order to remain successful, these advocates say they need help.
We need support. And organizations, grassroots like myself, need support.
The mayor says she plans to work with other city officials and other levels of government to put a plan in place that has funding for these programs to be sustainable.
In the fall, that's when all the budgets get pulled together. How do we sustain and enhance these very effective programs? What do each levels of government role would be?
Many of the advocates that were in this meeting this morning told us they liked a lot of the things that they were hearing, but some of them also told us that they believe talk is cheap.
Action speaks louder than words. Anyone can say anything. We'll see what takes place next.
The mayor says this group is going to meet again in the fall to discuss next steps. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Premier Doug Ford is sending a huge cash injection to tackle Ontario's housing supply crisis. It will allow municipalities to repair, rehabilitate, and expand drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure.
A total of $970 million has been allocated and will be distributed to 54 projects across 60 municipalities. All told, this round of funding will help build more than 500,000 new homes in communities across Ontario.
Also, $35 million will be sent to Peel to help build over 46,000 homes in the region. The second round of funding for municipalities opens next week. Ford also commented on a viral video where a Toronto police officer was caught on camera flipping off a member of the public.
We're doing our job, bro.
Yeah, I'm not your bro. I'm not your bro. It's a green light. You guys just missed the whole light cycle.
The video is undated and at an unspecified location. The person recording is seen arguing with 2 officers about parking in a loading zone in a marked police vehicle while they were at a coffee shop. Before driving off, one of the officers can be seen giving a middle finger to the person recording the interaction. Here's what Ford had to say.
Let's support our police. Let's thank them rather than getting Google glasses and trying to, harass our police. That's what I call it, was harassment. And why don't you say thank you, shake their hands, and keep going. And by the way, next time you're at a coffee shop, I'll run in and buy you a coffee. Anyways, I support our police, and as far as I'm concerned, they did nothing wrong today.
In an email, Toronto Police said they can't speak to the specifics of the incident, but acknowledged that the officer's response was not appropriate. The force says its professional standards unit is investigating. After weeks of deadly protests in Bangladesh over a quota system for government jobs, a new leader is set to be sworn in tomorrow, bringing a sense of relief to many in the country and the Bangladeshi community here at home. Tali Ricci has reaction from Little Bangladesh in Toronto's East End.
Across the globe in a small Toronto neighborhood, the civil unrest in Bangladesh is felt deeply.
We were actually worried about our family, what was going to happen to them.
Bad things happened. Some of my extended family members were shot.
We did feel very helpless.
Dozens have died and hundreds more were injured during demonstrations over the last several weeks. The protests were led mostly by students calling for an end to a quota system for government jobs and the Prime Minister's resignation. On Monday, the Prime Minister did resign and fled the country.
The community here is happy. Back home, we're happy. I'm proud. I'm proud what the students did. If you told me 10 days ago that this is how it would end, I would be completely surprised, because every uprising, for various reasons, was quelled with such violence. And this time, again, there was violence, but the students didn't let off. They kept marching forward.
So I do have some cousins over there. They've all been on the streets. They've been protesting against the government. And now that that's all done, they're actually all super excited.
Toronto's home to a large Bangladeshi community, and here people mobilized quickly to host their own protests and echo the demands of family and friends back home.
When they saw that the innocent were murdered and killed in the street, then they realized it's something that we should be vocal for. Then they just participated with their own sentiment, own principles, that they should stand for something. And I think people of all age and color, even some of my friends came from their background is Chinese, they were present yesterday. So I think we're able to draw attention of other communities as well.
And while the country is still reckoning with the aftermath of weeks of unrest, these business owners have a greater sense of hope about Bangladesh's future.
This really feels like a new Bangladesh already. It's going to take some time, but with this generation, this is just step one of a bigger battle. I bet on these kids that they can do it.
People are actually really happy. They're coming into our store, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, let's go! Bangladesh is free now!" And everybody's really excited about that. There's a better future for Bangladesh, and I think that there's a lot more change that can happen.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX fell 98 points, the Dow dropped 234 points, and the dollar traded up at 72.79 cents US. We'll be right back. Here's a live look at the Toronto skyline. A bright and sunny day out there, currently sitting at 23 degrees downtown, but you'll want to keep your umbrella handy for the next couple of days. We'll be getting hit with some rain starting around 2 p.m. tomorrow. That's expected to continue into Friday night before things clear up for the weekend. And it's time to giddy up for the unofficial start to the CNE. The Horsecapades kicked off today. Kids got a chance to see the horses up close and in action, and so did we. Here's a look.
I want to see the horses. Yeah.
This is a Horsecapades. We do this every year. We usually do it at least for 2 weeks. This time we started it just after Caravana ended. Kids can come in, they can learn about horses, watch a show. It's free of charge. We have 2 shows a day, 11:30 and 1, but from 11 to 2 we're open. It's lots of fun and a good education and exercise for the kids.
I want him to do.
And what do you call that?
Flipping.
Flipping?
Flipping over. Twilla.
There's so many kids that are really from the city and the GTA, what we call area, and it's their first time they get to actually experience and touch a horse and be a part of the community. And we do so many things in the horse world that we take for granted until we see these kids, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah, most of the time we do have a few kids that come back every year because they really like the show, but it's nice to see the newer kids come back every year, and the crowds just build.
1, 2, 3. Everything's free, by the way, so the pony rides, and it gives them something to do and makes them feel a part of it, and it really helps just, I think, bringing the city and the world of agriculture kind of under one roof and together.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us.